morning, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rogue Deck Chronicles. My name is Dean, and I have Devin on here with me. Say hi, Devin.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing today?
So we are recording this really early. It's actually 7 o'clock our time on a Saturday, which we normally record during the week. But there's some holidays coming up, and with traveling and visiting family, this just fits better and with our schedule. Also, there's really not much going on with the competitive scene for the next month until the Birmingham UK regionals or special event. Don't know what it is, but until that tournament happens, there won't really be much to talk about. So we're going to use this opportunity just to talk about different topics in the community. And this week, we're going to talk about rotation.
Yeah, I mean, with 2024 wrapping up, it's the perfect time to talk about what 2025 will give us. And rotation will happen in the earlier portion of 2025. So I thought when we were trying to figure out what to talk about for this week, this would be the perfect opportunity for everyone to kind of be like, let's sit down, let's look back in order to look forward for the TCG for the 2025 half of the season.
Yeah, so the game plan for this episode is we are going to go set by set through the sets that are going to be rotating. And we're going to talk about any notable cards and based from that, maybe notable archetypes that are going to be rotating with the rotation that will be happening sometime in the first half of 2025. I do want to make a note that at the time of recording, the Champions League Osaka is happening. I believe day one has already finished. I've watched maybe 2 minutes of a match, but we'll wait till those results come out, and we may talk about that in the next week or two. Most notably, the Terrassal Festival set in Japan is legal for this tournament, so the Badu and the Regigigas are the two big cards from that. So we'll see how those two cards impact that tournament if they do. And yeah, we'll definitely talk about it once we get more information, but just want to let y'all know we're not ignoring that tournament. It's just still ongoing at the time of recording.
Alrighty, with that being said, let's start with what is rotation. Let's talk about what does that mean for people who are fairly new to the TCG. How do we know what cards are going to be rotated? And kind of just maybe a quick and fast summary of what should you prepare for a rotation block.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. So what rotation is that Pokemon has several formats, but the one for the competitive scene is called Standard. And the way they set up the Standard format is that they say certain cards can be played in tournaments, mainly to help prevent unusual combos, really unfair combos that make end games really much more quickly than what Pokemon anticipated. So they put this type of format in place to try to make it as even of a playing field as possible. So with that, really in the last couple of years, Pokemon made it easy to determine what cards or even what sets get rotated. And if you look at a Pokemon card, so I actually have one right in front of me, Play Stamp Boss's Orders. On the bottom left-hand corner, there's a letter in a square or rectangle. Based on that letter, that is the type of... Those are the cards you can play in standard legal tournaments. So in this instance, as of now, you can play F, G, and H block cards. So I kind of like how Pokemon did this because until recently, you had to know what sets, and even in the sets, you had to know what cards. And it made everything so complicated.
Not even that. So before regulation marks were a thing in Pokemon, when the rotation period was coming. So rotation didn't happen as early as it did. So with this regulation marks, they changed actually when rotation historically would happen. Rotation used to be right before Worlds. So Worlds used to be the first or the last, depending on when they wanted to make it happen. Tournament of a season. And the rotation was you had to wait to see where Pokemon would draw the imaginary.
And I remember sometimes they didn't tell you until like a month before the tournament too.
Yeah, like we knew, like all right, we knew what decks, and when it came to that, it wasn't the older card sets in a block that everyone was not sure about. It was like for our case, this one, poor example, was probably the closest one. It's like Crown Zenith is the last one that's rotating out of this block. Everyone would sit there and be like, is Crown Zenith going to rotate? Or are they going to make it the next set? In this case, the next set would be Scarlet and Violet base set. Like, what do we keep? What do we lose? Like, the first 5, easy decision. Like, the first 5 sets we're going to talk about today, everyone knew that was a slam dunk decision. It was always that, is there going to be a 6? Is there going to be 7? No one knew. So when they announced this block format, players across the world went, this makes life easy. Because now we can have a conversation 4 months before rotation of, yes, we know what's rotating.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do that in the past.
Yeah, I remember like when I first got in the game when you told me like, yeah, go check out this game. You also had to know what the symbols mean, and then you had to. It was so convoluted. Pokemon try to make it easy because when you write deck lists, they'll have the symbol number or the legend for the symbols on the paper and all that. But even then, people did not know, and even now, people still don't know until
deck checking. It's so funny. Like I used to be a judge, and I used to run pre-tournament deck checks when I was running cups, and people just did not know what was standard legal.
To be fair, I was one of those because I got a game loss at a tournament for not knowing what card was legal for that tournament. Granted, it was a expanded tournament for me.
No, for you it was expanded something on a ban list that no one uses expanded, so you were just doing what you could. Like this was a standard legal tournament. Everyone's like, I had to pull a player side. I'm like, you know this card isn't standard legal. He goes, what do you mean? I'm like, this rotated, and at that time rotation was like 6 months earlier. I'm like, this card rotated 6 months ago. You can't play this deck. I had to pull the player side. I'm like, do you have another deck? Like, do you have other cards? Because if not, this card turns into a basic energy.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my god, I didn't know. I'm like, go grab your friends. But that's where rotation used to be so complicated because it's just no one knew.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was very hard for players to really know unless they're in the loop. And I'm really glad that Pokemon made this transition in the beginning of Sword and Shield to make it easier on the player with the blocks of cards. So they let everyone know once the rotation hits, you rotate the oldest set. And as long as you know what the sets are legal in standard tournaments, it makes it easy to really determine what is rotated and what we can prepare for.
Yeah, and with that, I think it goes to just being able to have players prepare sooner and then just be able to practice different formats at different times.
So in this instance, I know a lot of people are already talking about rotation and preparing for rotation. I know last year, really once we got closer, a lot of these online tournaments started doing post-rotation fun tournaments for players. Granted, it's without the new cards release because you can't do it if the new cards are not on live. But it gave a way for people to kind of have an idea of what to expect once rotation hits. And with this year, we don't have an official date, but there's a lot of speculation and a lot of clues on when the dates are. So people are now planning for whatever tournament they're going to and making decks and getting ready for that tournament. So that way it's not just a big shock once we actually lose the cards.
Yeah, I mean, we know more with a very high certainty it's going to be sometime in like April.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
which week and all that, we don't know, but we know it's going to happen in that quarter. Like, we know what quarter is going to happen in, which is the good part. And another indicator is going to be is whenever the next regulation mark gets printed on the card. So, like, okay, now we're really getting ready for rotation because now we have a new regulation mark in the rotation. So that should be coming fairly soon as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right. So it will be, so we're FGH, so it will be I. So we're already up to I. But I think they started the block with D because they just caught up with what Japan did, because Japan did a similar system to this for a while. So now, just the last couple years, the TPCI region is repeating the system, and from what I can tell, all the players like it. There's really been no big complaints about it. Obviously, you still have to worry about reprints of cards, which only really affect trainer cards. But other than that, like, I like this system.
Yeah, so Pokemon was really the last one on the boat when it comes to blocks. This is actually a very standard way of marking your standard format in all trading card games. Pokemon was the outlier by not having a block system until now. That's why players loved it, because every other trading card game was, you don't have a block rotation? What's wrong with you guys? They thought we were weird.
So, with all that being said, we're going to start with talking about the different sets that are rotating. So, the sets that are rotating that we're going to talk about. Oh, you want
one more thing?
One more thing?
One more
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
about
go.
rotation. That's with the definition of what is rotating, right? You just mentioned if as a regulation mark, it's staying. That is true to a point. If it's a secret rare, it goes with the oldest mark. So gold cards and secret rare cards, if say, I'm going to use a very poor example, say Palkia V has a secret rare in Scarlet and Violet.
Which
right?
it doesn't, but
It doesn't, but
example purpose, yeah.
The secret rare does not count because it's not within the set number.
And that's where the regulation mark comes into play to help you out, because there are some cards that were printed in newer sets that did rotate. An example was in Astro Radiance, the spicy curry that's used in the cloth deck way from last season. That was actually printed in Astro Radiance, but it had a E block regulation mark. That's why it's not a standard legal card right now, because in the Japanese set that it came out with, it came out with that other set, but we got it later here in the TPCI regions. So that's why you have to pay attention to the regulation mark, because Astro Radiance was still legal, but that card was not.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there beforehand, because we might talk about a card that may be reprinted, but reprinted as a secret rare or gold rare or something like that. And that's where like the confusion really comes into play. So we may miss one or two cards here. We may miss something. We are going at this very broad stroked because we want to look at everything and more as a general conversation instead of individual exact cards. We're going to try our best to hit all the major talking points, but if there's a card you're not sure of, just check. And then really when rotation goes live and different other online platforms, that will be a really good way to figure it out as well.
Yeah, and one cool thing is that with the online client, so in our case for this one is Pokemon Trading Card Game Live, they actually hit rotation, I believe like a couple days before it actually hits. So it gives you a nice indicator of what cards are going to be playable, and it gives you a little more practice versus doing this research, which we've done mainly because this is something we're interested in, and also for this episode too. But it helps you save on that research if you are confused.
Yep. Alrighty, so let's dive into the sets. The first set that will be rotated is going to be Brilliant Stars.
Yes. Before we start, the sets we're going to talk about are Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Pokemon Go, Lost Origin, Silver Tempest, and Crown Zenith. There's a couple other like little small sets in between. Mostly those are reprints. So example was like the Trick or Treat, the match battles. I don't even know what that is. And the holiday counter. We're not going to talk about those. Those are basically just reprints of what is in the sets that we're talking about. So yeah, Brilliant Stars. So one thing notable about this set is this is the introduction of the VSTAR mechanic.
Yeah, so this block has two different mechanics that are rotating out with it. You just mentioned the first one as V-Stars, and then the second one is the Radiant Pokemon. So those are going to be some of the things that we will highlight as part of this conversation as well.
Was that part of this set?
Radiance?
Yeah. Or was that...
Radiance end with this block, yeah.
I know it ends with this block. I didn't realize it got introduced with Brilliant Stars.
I think I introduced a set or two earlier, but this is where Radiance get completely fallen out of standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And mechanics can be in two different rotations, and they do that very intentionally. Mechanics are definitely typically either something that stands on both ends of a fence, so that way it gets played for a little longer. And then sometimes it's just, all right, here's this mechanic in its entirety, and you get it for 2 years full.
Gotcha. So yeah, so Brilliant Stars, most notably, the mascot of the set, Arceus V-Star. I haven't really seen it a lot in tournament play lately, but I think it would be really not smart of us to talk about the importance and the impact it had while it was really good. And people still use it here and there. But that V-Star ability of just grabbing 2 cards whenever you want, that was game-changing once it got released.
Oh yeah, it was definitely the BDIF for the longest time with whatever partner it wanted. It was Arceus Duraludon, you had
Arceus Pikachu.
Yeah,
it was Pikachu, yeah.
You know, such a flexible card because it was cardless and you can put any energy in it and you just did what you needed to do. Another card we're going to be losing is Charizard V-Star. I know it wasn't the most competitive, but it was definitely a chase card from a collector's point of view.
Oh, I remember that conversation because this was shortly after... Oh, no, it wasn't around COVID, but I still remember going to the stores and people trying to get the rainbow art, anything Charizard V-Star, they were trying to get, and it was selling for really high amounts, too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Entei V, I know the legendary beasts are all going to be rotating in the block together. This may have not been like the most impactful, but it was a draw engine.
Yeah, and you've been seeing it a lot more lately in decks like Gouging Fire. Sometimes you'll see it in Charizard just because of the synergy with Fire Energy. But, like you said, Entei and Raikou V are both rotating. Suicune already rotated, but it just showed how like those 3 cards really impacted the game in a tournament setting because all of them were used a lot, too.
Mm-hmm. I would say the second most important card that's rotating in this set is Lumineon V. Sure.
I was going to bring that up. That's one of the staples that we're losing for just consistency purposes. It's almost most decks play one of, sometimes 2. I've been seeing a lot of 2-ofs lately, just so you can get that supporter that when you need it.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be something when it comes to deck building. We're going to have to adjust our philosophy because Lumineon V was the spiritual successor to Tapu Lele GX.
Yeah.
But players have been using that crutch for supporter search for such a long time. Now you have to find other ways to get your supporters, or just run a thicker supporter count when it comes to deck building.
Yeah, I know when Tapu Lele was around, you really can get away with playing 1 or 2-ofs, and that will be it because you can just find it when you need it. Same concept with Lumineon. Sometimes you just play that 1 of Roxanne, 1 of Iono. That way you can get it when you want to, and then you can end the game on your terms. Now I agree. You may need to up your supporter count. I would say like you can play cards like Silene, but we'll talk about that. That's rotating too. So you can't use
Hmm.
your supporter and then put it back in with Silene. So
Yeah, and then other ways to search.
I think
Another card that's rotating in this set. I'm kind of going a set order here. Is Manaphy.
I was gonna say that that is gonna be such a big impact because that's our bench barrier right now.
Well, bench barrier that isn't a specialty Pokemon. Because there's a couple other Pokemon that have bench barrier abilities, but nothing like this.
A Terra Pokemon, but that's the only thing that comes to mind. Like, but this is something that's splashable in almost every deck, especially if you're playing the low HP setup decks. Yes, you had canceling clone, but that was really the only way to play against Manaphy, and not every deck did that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a big thing. I remember when the Mew, the bench barrier Mew, rotated, everyone freaked out. And it was like, for a little bit, it was like a free for all. Everyone was like, I can snipe, I can snipe. And then they introduced the Manaphy, and it kind of, people were like, oh, it saved the day. So I'm wondering what card they will print next that will be the next bench barrier. I know that the Terra Pokemon have that built in, but would it be fair just to give it to the Terra Pokemon and not to everything else? I guess we'll see on that one.
Yeah, I've learned there are certain cards that everyone could have sworn that would never rotate. One of them was double colorless energy, and we haven't had double colorless energy in like 6 years now.
Yeah,
Switch is a card that will never rotate. So Switch has always been the mainstay ever since base set days. But bench barrier has always been a thing, but it's been different faces.
mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to get a bench barrier again, but it may not be until like middle of 2025.
Yeah, we'll see. I think a lot more people will go towards the Terra Pokemon route, which I believe is what Pokemon wants you to do anyway. So we'll see how that goes. Going through the list, I'm just trying to look for anything like that really stands out to me. Um, I'm not really seeing anything psychic that was like super impacting. I'm not seeing anything in ground or fighting. Sorry, I don't really see any dark type Pokemon, metal Pokemon. Not really. Dragon, not really.
The barrel rotates.
That's going to be big. I know a lot of people haven't seen it lately because I Iono and stuff like that. But I think the barrel is really important because it's an easy draw engine to set up. The carefree countenance, Bidoof helps it stay protected so you can get there. The 120 HP, even though lately hasn't been that big because of Duskull and Dusclops, it's easy to knock that out. But until then, this was a good mainstay in a lot of decks.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's why I think it was important that to point that out because draw engines are a thing. So now a lot of decks have to rethink how they want to do their draw engine.
Yeah.
Going into trainers and stadiums, we have Collapse Stadium.
Yeah,
That's going to be rotating. That's a big deal.
I think that's a big deal. It helps.
No, I agree.
Especially with Terapagos being out there. Like, granted, you can just bump the area 0 and bring down the 5, but having just 4, I know it saved me in a bunch of tournaments lately. Like, I used to play the Collapse Stadium in my Clothless, and I went against the Reggie Pikachu deck, and I wasn't, because of the Clops in play, they couldn't set up, they couldn't do their thing because they can't get 6 Pokemon in play, they can only get 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to win that match because of it. So this is definitely impactful, maybe not the most impactful stadium we're losing, but it's up there in my opinion.
Yep. And then I would say the last thing in this set of note that's rotating is double turbo energy.
That is the biggest thing I think we're losing from this set and just in this block, in my opinion. It just helps you play so many decks and be more aggro. We are in a very fast format, and that was a way to kind of get there and attack as quickly as possible. I'm sure Pokemon will develop a substitute for a double energy acceleration. We just need to see what that is, because like twin energy was a thing and it became double turbo. We'll see how they adapt going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift over next to Astro Radiance. And let's look over Astro Radiance's set to see what we will be losing. So I'm just kind of scrolling through slowly here to see what's in the set. And the first card of note I see is Origin Form Palkia and Palkia V and VSTAR. I think that's a very impactful card. You still see it in random decks to this day.
Yep.
And honestly, it's going to slow down any water acceleration decks unless you run the Baxcalibur line.
And even with the Baxcalibur, you have to either get it from, like, actually no, it's pretty easy to get it with Baxcalibur, but the VSTAR made it so easy to help accelerate up to 3 energy in play when you need it. And we'll talk more about that later in the episode with our Rogue Deck of the Week. But yeah, I remember this made a big splash, per se.
When this card was announced and played, it was game changing.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of players gravitated toward this archetype.
It still has that meme of that Australian regional where the top 8 was either one of 2 versions of Palkia V-Star. And it's still like, when that came out, it was good. Now it's still good with the adaptation with the Dusclops, and you compare it with either Trap Ghost or there's a lot of ways of playing it now, and it's just showed like how powerful this card remained throughout the duration of its standard legality.
Mm-hmm. And then another water type Pokemon that we're going to be losing is Radiant Greninja.
With
that,
oh yeah,
is going to be game changing. That was one of the few Radiants that saw consistent play the entire time.
Hey all you rogues out there. We just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you to our sponsor, For Honor and Glory. They are a great support to us and have all the things you need related to Pokemon, Magic, D&D, Warhammer, and more. You can go on over to forhonorandglory.com and use discount code ROGUE24. That's forhonorandglory.com and discount code ROGUE24 for 10% off your entire online order. Alright, let's get back to talking about those sneaky decks.
I know there's been talks of Radiant Greninja being the most powerful and best card ever printed, with the ability of discarding to draw. The attack is pretty decent, and you can do 90 and 90 to the bench, or really do 90 to 2 Pokemon. Doesn't even have to be the active. The HP is actually pretty decent. It was around when Lightning Pokemon really wasn't that much of a thing. So, like you said, it started off powerful, and it still is powerful. So losing a card like that for consistency is going to be... It's important. We need to figure out how we can get consistency back into the decks.
Oh yeah, and we'll talk with the summary about like the common themes you see post rotation, and that's going to be that's always one of them is what is our new consistency engines. So that's always that. The set I see the first one here, but the Reggie deck is completely rotating.
Yeah, I know it didn't make that big of an impact while it was around, but you played the Reggie deck at Orlando Regional a couple years ago. It came back with a Pikachu. With this set, it helped it be able to breathe new life. It was on stream for Toronto for round 3. Actually knew that team that brought it, that playtesting group, I knew them. And they were talking about like, oh, this is a broken deck, this is a broken deck. That didn't do well, but I can see why they say that though. To be able to accelerate is a bunch of energy from your discard and it's just energy, special energy, basic energy, no matter what energy is, just to be able to accelerate it to whatever Pokemon you want in play. And then having the Pikachu with the Arrow Zero Underdefs, and if you have 2 Regigigas in play, you can do it twice. That's insane.
Yeah, it was an interesting low to the ground, or not even low to the ground. It was a very combo reliant deck, but it was just an interesting deck that people wanted to play.
And if anything, the Regieleki itself, I believe that and the Regidrago, those are the 2 most important cards, because like outside of the Regi deck, you see Regieleki played in a lot of control type decks as well, because it was able to help get resources you need. Yes, it was an attack, but you didn't care at that point, because you're going to keep your hand. You know you're going to keep those cards. At least a good control or stall player can do that. And this is like a mainstay in a lot of decks. You even saw it in Charizard with Tord, the control style Charizard. So this is going to be definitely another impactful card that we'll be missing.
Yep, absolutely. I'm scrolling through more. The next one I see, and this card lost a lot of steam the deeper we got into the new standard that we're playing in now. But Radiant Hawlucha, I remember a time where Radiant Hawlucha versus Radiant Greninja was the conversation. Which one do you put in your deck? Because of how prevalent VMAX decks were at the time of the set.
Yeah, and I think that's why it lost steam, because currently there's only about 2 or 3 VMAX Pokemon, and no one's really playing them. Except for, spoiler alert, us. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But I remember that, like, doing 30 more damage, that was big at that point.
Yeah, doing 30 less damage, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it lost steam, but that's just because of the cards that rotated before it. If the wording was different, I'm sure we would have saw this more in the decks now.
Yeah, it was definitely designed for a very short-term meta.
Yeah.
Next, I see.
I think another Hisuian Pokemon we should talk about is Sneasler. The Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, that's rotating too, and we've been seeing that a lot more lately, especially with the increase of popularity with Cloth.
Yeah, the Poison archetype is definitely getting an overall downsize to everything. So it's something to definitely keep in mind. The Poison engine is definitely getting hurt.
Yeah, it makes you build that package differently. Luckily, Perilous Jungle is still around, so I feel like with the loss of Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, you'll probably see an increase of the Perilous Jungle in decks just to get that 2 damage counters back on. But the problem is, like, it doesn't affect Dark-type Pokemon, and with Charizard being so rampant, I'm not sure players will want to do that. Like, okay, you still get the Poison Tick, just in general, but that's 2 more made a big difference in math. So we'll see.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see how Poison adapts with this. They may find other, like, with the new set that comes out around rotation time, they may do something, or at least eventually. But we'll talk about archetypes that get drastically impacted and change once we go through the set list too. But yeah, that, and I like the V version of that. I put that in the Palafin deck to help with your free retreat, and that was really, really cool too. Not as impactful as the Radiant, his new Sneasler, but I think that was a fun card to include with the Palafin deck.
Yeah. Next card I see, this card has had an up and down history, is the Origin Form Dialga V and VSTAR.
Yeah, it's definitely making a resurgence with the Archaludon deck for sure. It didn't really gain any traction until Andrew Hedrick won that regional with it. And then it kind of lost steam. And then, like, with Metang, it kind of like, okay, I can see it back in the format. It's always been one of those fringe cards. But the V-Star attack, you can't deny that wasn't one of the best VSTAR attacks out there.
Oh, absolutely not. It is definitely up there, and it's classic Dialga. Dialga always has a card that says, do something very impossible. In this case, attach 5 energy, and then get an extra turn.
And,
so,
yeah,
and it's actually not hard to do anymore.
No. Especially with, that's why it pairs so well with Archaludon. You can set that up in 1 turn. Metang can set that up in 1 turn. So that's why you really saw it with just those, like, just pure steel decks or metal decks. But in the expanded realm, you can play this, Dialga GX, and you can take like 3 or 4 turns back to back with those abilities. Like, that's just a signature of Dialga, is being able to skip turns. And I don't think a lot of people will miss this deck. I will, but I like playing the steel type decks, so that's something else we're losing. I will say the next card I want to kind of just briefly talk about is that Regidrago with the Dragon Hordes ability.
Mm-hmm.
I played that in my deck in Toronto, and it is definitely a great out to Iono, especially in the late game. Have that in your active. You draw until you have 4 cards, and then you Fezandipiti, and you have a hand of 7 again. And it helped me out a lot. I've been taking this in and out with Genesect, but it's like, it's a really strong ability in any deck, and it's not just for the Regigigas deck, but any deck where you can easily pivot. I would say it was a mainstay.
Well, if you play Latias EX right now, then you can play Regidrago and not feel bad with the 3 retreat cost.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The next card I actually just want to point out, I don't know how much to highlight it, but it's Miltank with the Miracle Body ability. It was part of a Stall Wall archetype for a little bit.
Yeah, it lost traction, but in the beginning of when it was first introduced, it gave people flashbacks of going against Whitney in the video games.
Yes.
Couldn't go around it. A lot of decks were very V, or at that point, V heavy decks. So unless you played a single prizer, which back then was a little more difficult with V decks, you had no answer to it. Unless you play another card that rotates from this set, Canceling Cologne. That was the only way around it for a lot of decks.
Yep. Absolutely. So you mentioned Canceling Cologne. Let's go into the trainer section of this set. So Canceling Cologne is rotating, so there goes a lot of ability shutdown techs that right now I don't think there is another ability shutdown tech. So for the short term, there will be no ways to shut down your opponent's abilities, so you just have to figure out a way around it. You mentioned Silene earlier in the conversation. That card is rotating.
Mm-hmm.
We have Dark Patch rotating, which isn't super impactful, but kinda, depending on the archetype you want to play with. When it got reprinted, everyone goes, "Oh my god, Dark Patch is back," and it just didn't impact the meta like everyone was hoping it would.
I think it was such a bigger deal than what it was, because Darkrai VSTAR, we didn't talk about it, but that was part of this set too, with the Dark Pulse attack, where you just do X amount of damage for however many dark energy in play. Just that combo was so theoretically really good. It just turned out the dark decks weren't that powerful.
Well, it's because that combo was really good in like past standard sets, because I remember when Darkrai was the king because of Dark Patch.
Yeah.
And it just this meta and the standard that it lived in, dark types was overshadowed by another one. So that's why. I think it's important to note that Energy Lotto is rotating.
Yeah, that was important for a lot of special energy relying decks, like I keep saying it, Cloth. It saved me a bunch of times because I only played 4 DTE. No other energy, so it helped me get the energy I needed if I thinned out properly. Another card that's very impactful that we're losing is Hisuian Heavy Ball.
Yes.
Like, there's no other way to get Pokemon from your prizes, so if you're playing that one of whatever it is, you better hope you start with it.
Yep, absolutely. Supporter-wise, we are losing Irida.
Yes, that is
Um,
a big loss.
I think that's more of a bigger loss for the fact that the cards we mentioned earlier, the Palkia, the Greninja, like those are what that combination of that's how you could get it without having to use a Ultra Ball or something.
Yeah. And then we're also losing Roxanne. Um,
Mm-hmm.
haven't really seen it a lot lately. The only deck that really played is Lost Zone Box, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But just that hand disruption in the late game, like you have Iono, but that's pretty much it right now. And I think that's really it for this set. We're gonna go a little quicker.
Well, Tempo Sinnoh and Trekking Shoes.
I think Temple Sinnoh isn't as, yes, we're losing it. It was very impactful, but with the loss of spoiler alert, Lugia, I don't think it's as big of a deal because not a lot of decks are going to be really reliant on special energy, especially once we're losing DTE. But yeah, like right now, like a lot of decks played the tempo, and then Trekking Shoes helps you dig through. A lot of people are moving away from it, but I know there was a time where people played like 2, 3, 4 of them in a deck just so they can go through their deck quicker.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, so that's it for that set. So let's jump over to Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is a smaller set comparatively.
Yeah.
So the first card I want to talk about, I think the easiest one that what do we lose here is Radiant Charizard.
Yes. That is honestly from this set probably there's only 2 cards I can think of that are really impactful that we're losing, and Radiant Charizard's one of them. You see that in a lot of either colorless or fire decks because late game attach fire energy to it and you're doing 250, and it's only a single prizer. That card design is so nuts.
I think Zapdos was an important card at one point.
It's still important with Miraidon.
Yeah, but it's just not as impactful comparatively.
Yeah.
The other one would be, and I think I know what you're talking about here, as 2 cards. Snorlax. Block Snorlax is rotating, which I think some players are very happy for and some players are very sad.
I actually forgot about Block Snorlax because I don't want that card to ever exist. So now it won't exist starting in whenever rotation happens. So yeah, that archetype is basically going to be eliminated from standard tournaments. A lot of people hate playing against the stall. Not even control, it's just stall. It was very hard to play around, especially with that ability. So yeah, like you said, some people love to see it go, some people hate to see it go. It's just one of those polarizing archetypes.
Mm-hmm. And then the only other card I can see in this deck or this set that I would be saying is meta defining is Pokestop.
Yeah,
Stadium.
That was the stadium that a lot of decks just put in because nowadays stadiums are very item heavy. So if you needed to win the stadium war, you just put that in there and you're going to get the cards you need. At least for the most part, unless you are playing a HN deck and you Pokestop away 3 your Sadas. But you also have the chance of gaining your Nest Ball, Superior Energy Retrieval, and like a Pal Pad. So
yeah, it's always a risk reward with that card for sure.
Yeah. So, like you said, Pokemon Go was a smaller set. It was a mini set, but the cards that we're losing are impacting the meta so greatly.
Oh yeah, I would say for such a small set, it had a very big impact, almost to the point where you may not remember this, but when the Magma and Aqua sets back in the day, like there was only like 3 cards in those sets that were playable, but they were super impactful when they were played.
Yeah. So the next set we're going to talk about is Lost Origin.
Mm-hmm.
So Lost Origin reintroduced the Lost Zone mechanic. So with that, a lot of the cards we see that play around with it, we're losing all those cards. So we'll start from the from the beginning. I'm not really seeing anything from grass Pokemon.
Grass and Fire don't really have anything that was super impactful.
Not really. Even
Well, Water had Cramorant, which was a
yeah.
staple. And then obviously Kyurem V Max and V, pointing that out because that we'll be talking about those in a different section. But also Kyurem V Max actually was a very strong deck for a very short period of time. People did play that.
Yeah, I remember when we went to Toronto. When I went to Toronto right after the pandemic, my buddy Joe, who's been on the podcast before, he took this to Toronto and played. So we're losing that archetype. For electric,
Rotom V.
Yeah, that's a big one. You see that to help bring consistency in a lot of the setup decks right now. Notably, you see it in Charizard. You'll see this in ways where people just need to get draw early game. Yeah, it's a liability as a bench sitter, but the utility it brought to these decks was just so important.
Mm-hmm. In the Psychic type, the Comfy, which is again another staple to the Lost Zone deck engine.
Mm-hmm.
That card was easy of in any Lost Zone deck that you'd ever make.
I think another card to highlight too is the Mawile with the Tempting Trap attack for control, stall, or even mill decks. This was a way to really frustrate your opponent and take control of the situation. It was seeing a little bit of resurgence lately too, because a lot of Gardevoir decks were adding this in there just to help with the tempo of the game. So that's another big loss. Well, not big, but that's another loss we're getting. Going into the fighting type Pokemon.
I mean, I remember Aerodactyl V being just a nuisance.
Yeah,
for a very short period of time.
Yeah, it was a nice counter to a certain strategy. It was the VSTAR. I forgot what it did. Oh, it turned off
It turned, yeah,
the VSTAR abilities. So it was a great counter at that time. Going into Dark type.
We talked about the Radiant Hisui and Sneasler already.
I think we would be remiss if we don't talk about the Drapion V. Even though we don't see it now, it was such a impactful card when the battle style cards were around.
Yeah, it was the counter against Mew for sure.
Oh yeah.
And then we have Giratina V and VSTAR and Hisui Gudra V and VSTAR.
Yeah,
those were two very, very meta-defying archetypes, and even just tech cards in terms of Giratina at this point.
And Gudra, you see both being played in the Dragapult deck. So yeah, Giratina, it was a beast when it first introduced, and it still is very powerful. The Gudra with the tankiness. Those were just two really good cards that were missing. With that being said, like this also affects current decks. Like a lot of the cards that Dragapult plays, not Dragapult. I'm sorry, Drago plays these cards. So we'll see how that impacts everything. For the colorless Pokemon, Pidgeot V. Just with that ability of if it was on the bench, you can put it back in the bottom of your deck. Helps with control and stall decks to help not deck out. I played it in my mill deck. Helps me not deck out myself. Let's go to the trainers.
Yeah. First one I see trainers is we're going to be talking about Lost Zone cards here. Is Colorless Experiment, Lost City, Lost Vacuum, Mirage Gate. A lot of cards that are just always going to be in Lost Zone deck.
Yeah, that package. As we mentioned earlier, with this set rotating, you're going to lose that Lost Zone mechanic. There aren't any other cards that utilize the Lost Zone except for from this set. So your Lost Zone stands, I would start looking into finding a new deck for you. I don't know what is similar to what it is now, but that's just how this game evolves. Like, you can stay on the deck for 2-3 years, and now you have to find something new. And I'm sure there'll be something that these players will like to play. But this, this archetype is just, it's going away, and better for worse. It was great. I played a Lost Zone deck in Toronto last year. I paired it with Scizor. It was actually a really fun deck. But yeah,
I didn't think it was toxic by any means. I think it was a really healthy deck. I think it was good for the meta. I think it was it was a deck that has a very high ceiling and a very high floor, but you had to have a very high skill ceiling to be able to manage it correctly.
Yeah, and I think this deck helped, if you were looking for a challenge and help grow as a player, this deck was it. It helped with your sequencing, it helped with your resource management, it helped with thinking outside the box for your lines of play. This was definitely a challenging deck to play, very mentally exhausting, but for the players that were looking for the next step, I think this was the deck to go to. It definitely helped me out with my way of playing the game, and granted, it was mentally exhausting, but I think it was worth it, though. It helped me grow.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
So I think those are the big losses from from Lost Origin. The next set is Silver Tempest.
Yeah, and I'm really not seeing... I know Silver Tempest got a lot of flack for just not being a great competitive set.
Except for, like, a certain card.
Yeah, like I'm scrolling through here. I'm going through the deck list in order. Like, Grass Pokemon, Radiant Serena, but that really wasn't really played.
Not really.
Fire Pokemon didn't really have any impact. In the water section, you have the Alolan Vulpix V and VSTAR, but that was really it for a little bit.
The Articuno made a splash for a little bit, but
because paralyzed.
Yeah, but that was a reaction, and then the next tournament, people knew how to play against it.
Mm-hmm.
Electric,
I would say
maybe
the Regieleki VMAX was a deck for a little bit.
Yeah, but even then, people knew how to play around it. So,
and then you have the Radiant Alakazam is really good in some archetypes right now.
Yeah,
but I think the first card I'm seeing that really had an impact isn't even a fully evolved card. It's the Kirlia with Refinement.
Oh, even the Ralts too. The Memory Skip Ralts was very good, and then the Refinement Kirlia. You can argue with losing Refinement Kirlia, the Gardevoir deck is going to be it will get a huge nerf. Not saying it's going to be playable, but
yeah, it's going to lose a lot of consistency for sure.
Yeah, because that helped get your energy into the discard. I can talk to some players once we get closer to rotation. I know there's ways to get your energy into the discard for the Gardevoir EX, but I don't know how you can do it by losing this consistency, though.
I think Refinement is more of a consistency. Like, because discard 1, draw 2 is just so good. We're getting that back soon. We already see trade coming back in the near future, but
yeah,
that's why Refinement was so good. It isn't because you're able to put certain cards into the discard. You can still do that. You have a whole bunch of other discarding cards in the meta. It's the fact that you're doing it with a benefit of drawing 2 cards.
Yeah,
that's the game changer to me.
I agree with that. So that's going to be a huge impact to that deck. Other than that, not seeing any other psychic Pokemon. I'm not really seeing any fighting Pokemon. Dark Pokemon, not really. Steel,
not really. It goes all the way down to the
dragon and Regidrago.
Yeah.
So Regidrago and then the Lugia package. We got to talk about that. Both Lugia V-Star and Archeops is rotating.
Mm-hmm.
So that archetype will be going away. I remember playing in the Busted Lugia format, And that was when 30% of the room, if not more, is playing the same deck. That means the deck was good. So we're losing that. Granted, it's lost a little traction, but players like Raul Reddy is bringing it back. Kyurem Farah is bringing it back. So that is another archetype that will be going away. And then also Drago. That finally made its splash into the competitive scene. And within next couple months, it's going to go away.
Yeah, I mean, but it's fine. That's healthy for the archetype where it finally found the right set of combination of cards to be well. And then it's going to have its time to shine, and then it's going to go off to the sunset, and another deck's going to have its time to shine, and that's going to go off to the sunset. That's really a really well-designed meta in formats that Pokemon's been doing. It's like, all right, we have this Ready Draco from this set. Let's give it a couple pieces so it's time to be good. And then before it can just be too dominant for too long, it's gonna rotate, and then we can have players look at something else.
Yeah. So going into trainer cards, obviously losing 4 Sealstone, but really with no Vs, it would have been a dead card, but that card changed, especially in this set of standard format, because you lost a lot of, well, we saw a lot of V-Stars, but that Forest Seal was able to just grab whatever card you wanted. You saw that in a lot of basic setup decks. You saw that in really a lot of EX decks too, because you play that one of V-Star or V Pokemon, put the Forest Seal on, and then you still have a V-Star ability.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like we said, Silver Tempest was not the most overall impactful. It had 1 or 2 really standout archetypes, which dominated, don't get me wrong. But there wasn't enough flexibility in that set to really give other decks the time and resources to compete. Like, they basically said, here's Lugia, have fun dealing with it for 6 months.
Yeah. So, last set we're going to talk about was Crown Zenith. This is really a reprint set. I'm trying to see what really came from this set.
I mean, Leafeon V and VSTAR was okay for like a minute.
I'm
scrolling through. I don't really
even see anything that we haven't talked about. Radiant Eternatus was a thing for a little bit, but not really. Yeah, Crown Zenith didn't really introduce anything impactful to the competitive scene. It gave some cool decks, like Rotom V-Star was a thing for a little bit. I played the Zamazenta. That's important.
I would say Zamazenta, the V-Star was an important part, yeah.
No, the baby.
You think the baby? Oh, the baby, yeah, the Metal Shield one.
The Metal Shield, that was...
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, that was... Maybe importance at the best word, but I think that was the most impactful card in this set because it went into Metal decks so well. And then for GLC, it's perfect in GLC. You hit for 220 if your Pokemon got knocked out. It hit hard. But yeah, I think that was probably the card from this set if we had to pick one.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, a lot of this is just... And this happens with a set that's the last set of its era. We knew Crown Zenith was the last of the Sword and Shield time because right after that started the Scarlet and Violet meta, which changed in terms of mechanics and a whole bunch of other things. Like the one thing that this was the bookend of it was the yellow borders.
Yeah.
Ended. So, but yeah, I mean, that is rotation at 500 feet above everything to kind of give you an idea of what we will be losing. We kind of already talked about some archetypes, but we'll kind of go double back toward that. So we're obviously losing Lugia. We're losing Regidrago.
Palkia.
We're losing Palkia. We're losing Lost Zone. Arceus. So there's a lot of archetypes that you will see at the tables that are just not going to be there in like April.
Yeah, so this the one cool thing about rotation that I always like is this is probably the most creative part of a format because now you're still trying to figure out what works, what makes stuff consistent again, and then you're adding in the new set too. So I'm sure the first tournament that rotation hits, it's going to be probably the most interesting tournament of the year, just because we're forced to have that creativity to figure out what we can do once again.
Absolutely. It's that first month or two after rotation is always when the players kind of have to rethink how they play because a lot of familiar consistency engines are going to be missing or they're still trying to experiment with new consistency engines and decks are going to be a little weird. Some decks are going to not be affected, some decks will be affected, some decks will be completely gone and missing. So when that happens, just be prepared to be very flexible as a deck builder and as a pilot. That way you can be the best adapter at your tables. That way you're just one step ahead of the competition.
Exactly. So, like we said, that's rotation more or less in a nutshell. We may be missing some cards. There's just too much to really talk about that we may not even know on. So, we'll see when that hits, how everyone adapts, and we'll be adapting as well as we are playing the game, just with everyone else. But with that being said, I think it's time to go into the Rogue Deck of the Week. What do you think, Devin?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so fitting that we're talking about rotation with this Rogue Deck of the Week because this mechanic, this archetype is definitely going to be a victim of rotation for sure.
In a lot of different ways. We're playing a VMAX Pokemon. We're playing a VSTAR Pokemon. We're playing a Radiant Pokemon. We're playing like some of the main supporters are rotating. So a lot of we didn't plan this actually. We just were like, what is a frosty, icy deck that we can do for Christmas? And actually, we talked about this. This fits, like you said, perfectly with this week's theme in more ways than one. So, with that being said, let's talk about Kyurem V.
Hello, everyone. So, after we did recording of the podcast and before I was able to get everything up and running, I came down with something. So, I wasn't able to find time to do matches with the Kyurem VMAX deck. If I get better and in between, maybe during the holiday season, I get time to do recordings for it, then I will do some Kyurem VMAX deck profiles and matches. But right after this video records and gets posted, I'm not going to have time. I'm still recovering. So I do apologize for that, but I will put a showcase video out as soon as I'm healthy and as soon as I get time to do that. So please be on the lookout. I wanted to do this. This is definitely future Devin post recording, but I wanted to let everyone know about that. And we'll get back to the end of the episode.
Yeah. So you and I both did a couple of test matches with this before recording today, and really the biggest thing that I felt when playing around with this deck is that you can just tell it has been a victim of time.
Yes.
The VMAX mechanic has not aged well into the current standard archetype, in the current set of metas. It just feels like, even with it being maybe as fast as it could be, that 3 prize burden is so bad.
To put it this way, for those who don't know, Kyurem VMAX is a VMAX stage, so it's not stage 1, it's a VMAX. 330 water type Pokemon with the Glaciated Whirl ability, which reads, once during your turn, you may discard the top card of your deck if that card is a water energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon. And then it has an attack, Max Frost, for 3 water energy for 120 plus. You may discard any amount of water energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 50 more damage for each card you discard in this way. So it's 330 HP. It's a 3 prize attacker. Charizard EX is a 330 HP with a 2 prize attacker. So you're already losing out on the prize trade with that. We have it paired up with Palkia V-Star to help with the water acceleration, with its ability. We have the Radiant Greninja in here to help get the water energy into the discard pile. There is a lot going on with this. We're going to be tweaking the list that we play, and once we kind of find a more optimal way, we'll have the showcase video, and we'll put the optimal list into the show notes. But I found it to be too slow in the late game. It was great in the beginning, but I also went against 2 Charizards back to back.
No, I went against in just a couple matches. I went against a Miascarada deck with the Grand Tree Stadium card, and it was just able to consistently hit the 330. Like, it was like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, all right, I have to discard 5 energy to knock you out for 2 prizes. They just have to get like 3 energies in their combination to do damage to me. I'm like, wow, I can't keep up with this. Like, and that's what it is. The VMAX is prize trade wise. If it was 2 for 2 prize trade, I could keep up. But when I have to take out 3 KOs and they only have to take out 2, that was really the feel bad moment of the deck. But I'm going to still play around with it. I'm going to try to optimize the list and showcase it a little better. But early testing with the list that we first created wasn't the most optimal. There's definitely areas of improvement, and I'm going to play around with that before the showcase to kind of see what I can maximize out of that archetype.
Yeah, and there are some cards in there I like. We have Irida in there. I think that's perfect for this deck. I like the Ciphermaniac. I think that's really fine. But I think we have to play around with the energy count. I think the A spec will need to figure out what is the most optimal. Right now, time of recording, we played the Scoop Up Cyclone, which I can see why, to help get that 3 prize liability off the board, because 330 isn't necessarily easy to hit into, but you don't want to give your opponent an easy 3 prizes, so I can see the logic of playing Scoop Up Cyclone. Not sure if Prime Catcher may be better, or even Hero's Cape, or something to kind of make this deck work a little better, or even, heck, Legacy Energy to make it down to a 2 prizer.
Yeah, Legacy Energy, I think, would help with the VMAX attack cost, but no one else. That's the problem.
Yeah, because it will be considered a water energy once it's attached, but then you're discarding that Legacy Energy if you have to. So we'll fool around with it. Just, we wanted something to really symbolize this time of the year. Usually outside of the state of Florida, it's cold. Actually, no. Right now it's like 45 degrees out.
I would say I'm in sweats and a hoodie right now, so I don't know what you're saying. It's not cold. It's just not a white winter outside. We're just not going to get snow.
Yeah. So Kyurem VMAX, it's one last hurrah while it's still standard legal. We'll have the showcase video up the Friday after this episode drops. Since we're recording a little early, it gives us a little more time to play around with this deck and make it the best we can make it. But yeah, that is this week's episode. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Devin?
No, I think we hit everything pretty well. I think we got a good plan going into 2025 when it comes to rotation and deck building for the future. Wrapping up a good, solid 2024 TCG year, and looking forward to see what the new Scarlet and Violet era of cards gives us. Yeah,
so thank you for listening and letting us ramble as we talk at 7 o'clock in the morning. Enjoy y'all's holiday. Be safe, and we'll see you in the new year. So until then, have fun playing those sneaky decks.
Have a great day, guys.